to the IMF, and now that sparked nationwide debates as it has officially been scrapped. Now, the hope is that this move will bring relief to Ghanaians, but critical questions do remain. How does the government plan to fill the revenue gap? What are the economic and social implications of this particular decision? Now, joining me to have this crucial discussion, I've got in studio Professor Benedicta Yaira, beg your pardon, Yaira Fosu-Mensah. She is part of the NDC's national communication team, and she will be speaking with us on the government's position. I've also got in studio with me Professor Godfred Bokwin. He's an economist, and he'll also shed some light on the fiscal impact and implications. We will be joined in due course also on Zoom by Mr. Charles Kwesi Addo. He's the National PRO, Mobile Money Agents Association of Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm surrounded by professors this morning, so I know we're going to get a lot of education. How are we doing?
Good. Good. Doing well.
All right.
I hope you're also doing well.
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We've had a raft of interesting measures coming from government, so we want to explore that in some detail, also looking forward, especially when it comes to plugging some of the holes that may be created. But let's take a look at the journey of E-Levy, and in particular, how it came to be. But before we do that, actually, let's go back onto the House of Parliament. Actually, let's look at that timeline. Key timelines of the very controversial E-Levy. Now, in November 2021, Ken Ofori-Atta proposed the E-Levy at some 1.75%. Now, with much resistance, we saw that number come down from 1.75% to some 1.5% in January 2022. Now, subsequently, in February 2022, members of the NDC Youth Wing and some Ghanaians demonstrated against this levy. Well, in March 2022, E-Levy was passed by Parliament and assented to by then-President Akufo-Addo. It came into being in May 2022 with implementation of E-Levy at 1.5%. Now, we saw a further reduction come January 2023 to some 1%. Now, fast forward today, E-Levy is no more. You'll see that it'll take some time, of course, for that to reflect in your pockets, as some measures have to, of course, be taken, the president having to assent to it, and then, of course, the relevant stakeholders doing the needful to ensure that it is taken off the record. Now, when it comes to the bills that were passed in Parliament yesterday, we have the Electronic Transfer Levy Repeal Bill. That's what's going to see that E-Levy being taken off. Also, Emissions Levy Repeal Bill 2025. And finally, Income Tax Amendment Bill 2025. Also, betting tax gone, taxes on gaming and lotteries, and as well 1.5% withholding tax on unprocessed gold. Also, the Revenue Administration Amendment Bill 2025, that's to reduce the percentage of total revenue set aside by the Finance Ministry into the Ghana Revenue General Refund Account. We'll talk about that also. And also the Value Added Tax Amendment Bill 2025, and that's to exempt payment of tax on motor vehicle insurance. There's also the Special Imports Levy Amendment Bill 2025. Now, that's going to amend existing law passed in 2013, Act 861, to extend the period of implementing the law from 2026 to 2028. There's also the Growth and Sustainability Levy Amendment Bill 2025. Now, that is seeking to raise levies imposed on gold mining companies, other mining companies, and upstream oil and gas companies by 3%. And this one has been touted as being quite strategic by taxing the sectors where we're seeing a lot of monies being generated. All right, now let's go onto the floor of Parliament and see exactly what happened as these taxes were repealed. Well, when we have those videos ready, we will, of course, bring that to you to give you a sense of what happened yesterday on the floor of Parliament. But Professor Benedicta, let me come to you first of all. Well, the NDC and President John Dramani Mahama said that these taxes were going to go, and we see that you've made good on that promise. Now, how does this fit into the wider scheme of what your government seeks to do as far as taxes and revenue mobilization, revenue generation is concerned?
Yeah, thank you, and good morning to my co-panelists, and good morning to our cherished viewers. Yes, the scrapping of E-Levy is a fulfilled promise by the NDC and His Excellency John Dramani Mahama during the 2024 campaign, and also the manifesto. We promised Ghanaians that we would scrap E-Levy. And indeed, he has done it. He has walked the talk. And we all know the fact that E-Levy, when the discussion started, Ghanaians saw it that it was going to burden them. And I remember very well that there were a lot of acrimony, there were a lot of agitation when they wanted to implement E-Levy. The NDC saw that E-Levy was going to burden Ghanaians, and so scrapping it was going to kind of relieve Ghanaians of that burden of taxation. Normally, if you want to grow an economy, the best way is not to tax the people, because we know that taxation would end up maybe shrinking the economy further. We saw it in E-Levy. Before E-Levy, a lot of people were doing electronic payment.
Right.
But when E-Levy started, we saw a lot of people drawing back. And so for that matter, the digital economy was affected somehow, because a number of people, stopped using electronic transfer because of the charges that was going to be paid. So by removing these, we are going to have an inclusive economy where the poor that most often use these medium as a form of transaction or transferring money from one point to another would engage more into the use of these digital platforms. Again, that will also help to boost the economy, in the sense that by removing this tax, the money remains in the pocket of these individuals, and people are going to spend more. We know that as people spend more, it would naturally help the economy to grow, because more people are spending more. So if the money that government, as tax, is reserved in the pocket of people, one, it will improve on the lives of the people, and also it will drive economic growth. In addition, by doing so, also by removing the tax, is a kind of huge relief to business world, in the sense that you can imagine if you transfer 1 million as a business man, a woman, or as a business person, if you transfer 1 million by E-Levy, you are going to pay a tax of 10,000 Ghana cedis. Now, we are saying that government.
Would you be able to do that via the platform, though, 1 million?
I mean, if you are doing an electronic transfer, you will pay some charge.
Right.
So I'm just equating that to the 1% E-Levy.
Right.
You are going to pay a tax of 10,000. 10,000 is a huge amount of money to a businessman. Now, government is saying that this 10,000, you should keep it. And that is a lot of relief to the business world. So more people are going to save a lot, and that will reduce cost of doing business, and that naturally would result in people spending more, as I indicated, by people having more money in their pocket and spending more. That will result in economic growth. businessmen would employ more people. As people or more people are employed, you would also have the benefit of government, getting its tax through income tax and other form of taxes. So for me, I think it is a welcoming news, and Ghanaians are very happy. It is a promise that the government and for that matter, His Excellency John Dramama promised, and he has delivered, and I salute him this morning for bringing these huge reliefs to Ghanaians. You can see the excitement in the public because this E-Levy was a burdensome E-Levy. He has shown that he is a man that walks his talk. Whatever he said he will do, he has delivered. And so far for this 3 months, Ghanaians have given us a plus because indeed, almost all the promises that he said he would do, he is in the course of doing it. And this E-Levy is a huge a relief. People keep saying that, yes, E-Levy brings in a lot of income.
That was going to be my next one, because, Prof, you mentioned that with the introduction of E-Levy, there was a decline in the use of, the electronic means of transferring money, so what we call the Momo and all of that. But we know that, yes, I think it was for the first 3 months after the E-Levy was introduced, we did see that decline in the use of mobile money and electronic transfers, but that after a while steadily got back on the ascension. It started to appreciate as well. Now, whilst the targets that were set were never met in terms of how much would be collected, is the government not worried that they're losing out on some revenue? So, for example, in 2023, I believe it was, the target was some 2 billion government raised at the time, some 1 billion Ghana cedis. Now, those monies will no longer be coming to government. Is there a concern? And what does government intend to do to replace those monies that we're not going to be seeing in the coffers?
I think as a father or as a parent, you will be more concerned when your children are suffering than anything else. So government should be more worried when its citizens are suffering because of the burden of taxation. And so I think that it is of a great relief to Ghanaians that these burdens have been relieved. As I indicated, there are so many avenues by which government can generate income to carry out its developmental activity. For example, during the MPP era, we saw the government appointing 120 ministers. Now, in this current regime, or in this current administration, we have just 60 ministers, half. So the cost of having one minister or maintaining one minister, we all know it's thousands of Ghana cedis per month. So if you have reduced this cost by 50%, that money should be enough to, take care of certain things. Now also, when you look at the Auditor General report, we saw huge amount of money lost to corruption. In fact, in the MPP era, corruption became almost like a daily happening, almost every day with a new scandal. Now, if these avenues of deliberately taking money that do not belong to individual are, blocked, that becomes a huge avenue. We saw, I think there was a particular year, I cannot remember whether it was 2023, almost about 15 billion was lost to corruption. So you can imagine if we are able to stop those leakage, that would be a huge source of income to the government. And also, we are saying that by removing electronic levy, it would boost economic growth in the sense that once taxes are removed, the business sector or the business, business sector would have a form of relief. They will be able to expand their businesses. They will be able to employ more people. Once you are employing more people, it will mean that you will be able to generate more income from income tax and other avenue. And we know that once we are seeing economic growth because, you know, businesses have been relieved of certain taxes. Naturally, you would be able to drive the economy and get the necessary tax. So for me, it is not just the issue of we are losing money because this tax has been removed, but there are other avenues. The sludge fund would also be a source by which government can also generate some money to be able to take care of its needs. We are talking about road. We are introducing the road toll, which will not, again, be the traditional method where people are by the roadside collecting money physically, but we are going to modernize that. That will also be an avenue by which there will be a huge source of income to the government. So I would say that we shouldn't look at tax as the only means by which government can get income, but also there are a lot of ways by which government can get income by stimulating and making business environment more conducive for people to do business, and by so doing more people are employed and more individuals are roped into income tax and other taxes that will be a source of revenue to the government.
So, Prof, from what I understand, you say that it's, as you said, it's not just about the taxes, and that if we are able to plug the leakages in the system, so there's less wastage. You also talk about corruption and the like. And so what you're asserting today is that the NDC government will be taking a close look at some of these other reasons for which the state loses money to seal those holes, so that the everyday Ghanaian is not burdened, and that these extra monies that are going to be saved from not paying some of these taxes will then go back into the pockets of the everyday Ghanaian to do business, and then that money, as we say, will be walking around. Let's talk about the repeal of the betting tax as well. Now, I recall at the time when these conversations were rife, there was also another conversation about how to promote responsible gambling. Now, how do you see the repealing of this betting tax affecting Ghana's betting industry, and what kind of safeguards does government have in place to promote responsible gambling? A lot has been said about the youth not having jobs, and that's the reason why they turn to avenues such as betting. What do you make of that particular conversation about putting those things side by side?
Now, I know there are people who have arguments that by removing the betting tax, you are encouraging more people to go and bet. But I don't think that is the case.
You don't think they have a leg to stand on?
I don't think that is the case. You know, sometimes people go to entertain themselves maybe because they really do not have much doing. And this government is saying that they are going to create jobs. They are creating jobs through a number of programs. Now they have introduced issue of planting of trees. We have the youth employment program also running. The big push is going to start. That will be development of infrastructure. And once we know that infrastructure are developed or put in place, it will create a lot of jobs for individuals. And also the fact that there is a deliberate attempt by government to make sure that a lot of people are employed. Government is deliberately going to encourage businesses to expand by supporting and creating the right environment. And that is why we are seeing some of these taxes being removed, because the idea of removing this tax is to stimulate business environment so that it will create growth and enhance employment. Issue of betting, and for that matter, it will encourage. I think there are rules and regulations as to the age groups that are supposed to be engaged in betting. And so those rules still are still maintained. So the fact that E-Levy, betting tax is removed, does not mean that you will have a child that's below 18 years going to do that. There will still be some monitoring to make sure that removing the tax does not mean that it will be an avenue for maybe school-going age. Instead of attending school, you would be there betting. But it is just a way of relieving the youth because, for example, people struggle to, win these betting and government trying to take so much from them. It's just to stimulate the industry. When these individuals carry out these activities, that's the industry, the betting industry,
right,
they also pay some form of tax. And so government will get its tax from that avenue and not the individuals that win their chances. And so for me, I think by government creating more jobs is going to drive, more youth into getting themselves engaged in other jobs than just going to be in a betting area trying to bet. So the removal of the tax, as I said, is going to boost the betting industry because we know that I know some people who said, in fact, they stopped betting or they reduced the amount they spend when the charges started. Right. And so by doing so, more people will get into it. It will make the industry to also boom because the more people bet, the more money the industry also gets. And that is plowed back into the economy that will also generate more growth. So I see it as a plus because, like we indicated, when you go to the developed world, for example, when you go in, there are some places, I'm told, when you take a loan, the amount, the interest is just about 1% or 2%.
Right.
And those economies are doing very well because the amount of money you pay as interest on a loan is so small. So you are able to get enough money to expand your business.
Right.
But when you come to our place, you are seeing banks charging as high as 30%. Now, if you go and take a loan of 30%, how much money is left for you to expand your business? So you cannot say that by paying more taxes, you would, your businesses will grow by so doing. No, but we are saying that more money should be made available for businesses so that they can grow and further expand their businesses. True.
Now, Prof, because you mentioned other jurisdictions and how much they also levy on the betting and all of that, I know that there are also some measures that are taken by government to also promote responsible gambling, messaging that is put maybe on television and the like. Is there anything like that in the pipeline that, as they call themselves investors, as investors are investing, they also understand that, this cannot be the be-all and end-all when it comes to generating an income, because for some young people, that really has become their sole source of income?
As I said, it is when people are idle, that's where you would go and be in a facility the whole day doing betting. And so if we drive employment, if government make in that deliberate effort to get more youth employed, as you can see, there is that commitment from this government because for the first time we have a ministry for youth and development.
That's right.
So this ministry is dedicated to developing the youth and creating jobs for the youth. Previously the youth was merged with sports.
That's right.
And sports, there was so much attention paid to sports than youth development. But this government saw the need to really invest in the youth by creating a whole ministry for the youth. So I believe that by creating that ministry, you would have that deliberate programs to train youth that that do not have skill, and to also give jobs to youth that have skills that are idle. And so by so doing, I believe that it would serve as an avenue to rope in people who are idle, who are really not doing anything, are not really getting any reliable source of income, and so betting as the only means of survival. So you would not, you know, have people just going the whole day, be in an area just betting, but you have people who are actively engaged in work that brings sustainable source of income to them. And so for me, the creation of youth ministry is a demonstration that government is committed to youth development and also building the capacity of the youth.
Absolutely. Prof, thank you so much for those thoughts. We can now take a look at what happened on the floor of Parliament yesterday.
The deduction will no longer take place and government will lose close to 2 billion Ghana cedis. But the 2 billion Ghana cedis that government is going to lose will now come to Ghanaians. So in effect, individual Ghanaians who ordinarily would have lost 2 billion Ghana cedis will now retain their 2 billion Ghana cedis. And government that would have gained 2 billion Ghana cedis by way of deductions from Momo transfers, government will lose the 2 billion Ghana cedis. The reason for repeal is to ensure that there is availability of additional disposable income to households and to reduce the tax burden on individuals. Mr. Speaker, if this is the reason why we are repealing the E-Levy, then E-Levy is 1%. Why don't we go and repeal VAT, which is about 17%, if we are looking at ensuring that there's disposable income for citizens?
Honourable members, the motion is adopted. The Electronic Transfer Levy Repeal Bill 2025 is now read the third time. The question is, those in favour say aye. Those against say no. Honourable members, the ayes have it.
All right, so just a few clips there of what happened yesterday as some of the taxes were scrapped in Parliament. Let me come to Professor Bobkin on this one. Now, before we even get into the nitty-gritty of how government can plug these holes, what lessons can this government and subsequent governments learn from the E-Levy debacle, how it travelled, the kind of controversy that it sparked?
Well, I think E-Levy was a low moment in our democracy. Largely because there wasn't proper consultation. I want to believe that if the government at that time had subjected the E-Levy policy through the filtering process, even at the Ministry of Finance, and allow for independent evaluation of the policy, probably they would have learned useful lessons. And also if they had done broader stakeholder consultation with the telecoms, the mobile money operators, and even ordinary Ghanaians, probably they would have gotten useful insight that could actually shape the policy. So I believe that it's a win for Ghana that E-Levy will now exist in the textbooks. And I think that it was a smart move. My considered view is that regardless of whoever won the 2024 election, E-Levy would certainly go.
That was a promise by the two leading parties,
yes,
that it was certainly going to go.
Yes, under the Fourth Republic is the first time in the run-up to our election that you have the two major political parties agreeing on a fundamental issue. What was the issue? Both parties, for the first time since 1992, agreed that they needed to move the economy from taxation to production. The concept or the idea of moving the economy from taxation to production was strongly introduced into our debate in the run-up to the 2016 election. At that time, it was the NPP that campaigned on the back that the economy was overtaxed. And we needed to move the economy from taxation to production. And actually, they followed that. If you look at the 2017 budget statement and government economic policy, the NPP followed that and actually removed a number of taxes. Some of them, they adjusted the rate downwards and stuff like that. Then they said they were moving the economy from taxation to production, started with that, and ended up in the deeper taxation, right? So I'm hoping that the government will be able to stay on this course for the next 3 years. Because the idea is that, you see, under the Fourth Republic, once there's a regime change, they come with the people in mind. 2 years down the line, you see the divergence between the reality and then the ruling class. I hope that they will learn useful lessons from this so that they will not take Ghanaians just for the sake of voting, and then they get to power and do whatever they want to do. But overall, if you look at it within context, E-Levy doesn't meet the basic principles of taxation.
Okay.
It doesn't. So it surprised me, actually, in 2021, when government spoke about introducing E-Levy. We opposed it strongly. In fact, I want to say that it was E-Levy that probably broke the camel's back when it comes to NPP's relationship with academia, some of us. And because we felt that this was backward. This shouldn't have, in fact, I know colleague lecturers who sent memos to the Ministry of Finance, to the Minister of Finance, trying to argue that this is not the way to go. And if you look at the data after the introduction, you realize that Ghana's performance when it comes to mobile connectivity index across infrastructure, affordability, usage, and the rest of them, our score had come down.
That's right.
And mobile service cost, approximately 30% of that is attributable to taxes, right? From general taxes, communication service tax, and then specific tax like E-Levy and the rest of. So I think that, and really, if you look at it strategically, it was an own goal.
An own goal, you say?
For the MPP. Because here you had your vice president, who was going to be your flag bearer, who had moved away from the economy, which was his free elective, and now moved into digitization, and then you introduce E-Levy along that path. That's an own goal. And so come to think of it, that the MPP actually said they were going to abolish E-Levy in their manifesto. Who introduced it in the first place? So I think that they were not strategic.
Right.
And I believe that in the heat of the crisis, they got swallowed by the enormity of the challenges that emerged because of simply how they managed COVID. Right? So every now and then they kept telling us, oh, COVID here, COVID there, and all of that.
Russia, Ukraine as well.
Come on. Go and check inflation rate in Ukraine, where the bullets are actually landing. And check the inflation rate in Ghana here, and check the recovery and all of that. So, and even look at Russia, look at the economy with all the sanctions and all of that. But we may not want to compare ourselves to Ukraine, Russia, and the rest of them, but compare yourself to Cote d'Ivoire, a neighboring country, and see the resilience of the Ivorian economy to COVID and Russia, Ukraine. If you look at Burkina Faso, look at Benin, and even look at Kenya. Look, in the East African countries, cost of food is so cheap. It looks as though you should sleep in Ghana and wake up and go and eat in Cote d'Ivoire and come back.
Because of how much cheaper it is.
Come on. Okay, so we've done all of these things to ourselves. Then we said in the third quarter of 2021 was the optimal time for Ghana to have surrendered to the IMF, right? But because of pride, ego, and the rest of them, we said we would not go. Then we said we're going to introduce E-Levy. In fact, we said that even if E-Levy was going to rake in the much needed revenue that they spoke about, the issue was not just revenue shortfall. Right. The issue was policy credibility. The issue was that there was a disconnect. People didn't have confidence in government and government institutions. You don't resolve that solely by raking in more tax revenue. You need policy credibility. You needed that external anchor. If the government had listened and probably applied to the IMF in the third quarter of 2021, or probably used the 2022 budget presentation in 2021 to announce IMF program, that would have saved us. In fact, there would have been no need for domestic debt restructuring. There would have been no need for external debt restructuring. That delay is what has resulted in this huge loss and all of that. So I think that, and I believe it's not only the government that is learning the lesson, the MPP would also learn their lesson, so that when they get a chance, I'm using the word when, because it's just a matter of time. This is
okay.
Ghana.
You're not saying if. You say when next is their turn to be in the driving seat, they don't repeat this kind of mistake. I'm not sure Professor Benedicta will agree with that assertion. But
I'm not expecting her to agree.
But I want to come back to this issue of consultation about with academia and important and relevant stakeholders. How then would you say governments should juxtapose the need for consultation but also remaining resolute in their conviction? Now, in this particular instance, I think the majority of Ghanaians can say that this particular resolve to go ahead with E-Levy was just simply not in the right direction, according to all of the data collected, the polls that we ourselves have conducted, listening to the everyday Ghanaian. So how do governments then make that balance? I mean, should you listen to everything that academia has to say?
They don't need to.
Okay.
In fact, probably it was not necessary listening to academics. But the science was clear.
Right.
The data was clear. Ordinary Ghanaians, the mobile money agent network, they had done their own analysis. They were even speaking much forcefully than we economists and the rest of them. So they didn't need to. But look, at the end of the day, it wasn't the way to go. Quite clear. And let me also say this, that our proposition in resolving this issue, apart from going to the IMF, we had indicated that government needed to embark upon wasteful expenditure cuts. This is how you manage crisis. This is how you identify with ordinary Ghanaians. And let me tell you, Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire did that. Well-meaning countries that meant well for their citizens took steps to cut wasteful expenditure. But we didn't do that. You look at how this government is managing the shortfall. If you look at the 2025 budget, the government is cutting expenditure. Look, in 2025, our gross financing needs, which is an indication of our borrowing requirement, is much lower compared to 2024. Right. In 2024, per revised budget, our gross financing needs was around 54 billion Ghana cedis, with the expenditure excesses in terms of excess of expenditure over projection, we ended up with 61 billion. Can you imagine? But in 2025, our gross financing needs comes down to 44 billion Ghana cedis. So there is a corresponding expenditure cut. In fact, it's the first time in more recent time where we have seen fiscal consolidation shifted a bit more towards expenditure. So when we talk about fiscal consolidation, you can either do revenue-based fiscal consolidation, where the focus is more revenue enhancement, generate more revenue, or you do expenditure-based fiscal consolidation, where you cut wasteful expenditure. It's not every expenditure you should cut. There are some expenditure that when you cut it will hurt growth. But we are talking about cutting wasteful expenditure. When you do that, you create fiscal space that can enhance growth-enhancing spending. So if you look at the strategy, the fiscal strategy of the government, they are cutting the expenditure, whilst they are also looking at some revenue measures to close the gap. So the revenue losses will not be closed solely by introducing new tax handles and stuff like that, but you're also looking at the expenditure cut. This is what governance entails. This is what leadership is all about. You see where you need to adjust expenditure and where you need to adjust revenue. I think the government failed to do that. And they paid the price. The real verdict for all these miscalculated policies, you saw it in the 2024 election. So
that's why you say that, well, governments have the liberty to choose to listen to stakeholders. They can listen to academia. And if they fail to do so, well, the consequences will be there.
And I am sure if they had listened to their own inner circle, right, the vice president and all of them, probably they wouldn't have introduced E-Levy. I mean, it was an on-go, and I think that you don't need to be a prophet to realize that it was not going to end well with that. But I think overall it's good that E-Levy is gone. I'm looking at it more from a progressive point of view. Okay. That if you look at our economy, you are looking at, is it a traditional economy, bricks and mortar, that holds a future for this country, or the digital economy? We've all come to the conclusion that the future is increasingly digital. In fact, the future of money, the future of currency, the future of business is increasingly digital. So we're saying that these days in economics, we talk about digital economics, how digitization is changing the factors of production and interaction, leading to output, lower costs. Okay, so the future of finance is increasingly digital. So the expectation is that the digital economy is expected to grow faster than the traditional economy. If that is the proposition, then you don't introduce tax as a hindrance. You just need to liberate that sector to grow. And along the value chain, more businesses will be established, profit will go up, government will also generate tax revenue from that end. So that is how we should look at it. When we oppose E-Levy, we were not asking Ghana government to compete in the space economy, worth over $1.8 trillion. We've left that for Russia and China and US, the rest of it. We are just talking about growing your own digital economy here.
So you see that E-Levy then hurts that growth. I mean, for those who say that it's a booming economy and there should be some way for government to maybe dip their hands a little bit to take a little bit because it's booming, it's growing. What do you say to that?
Taxation is not just a concept to raise revenue.
Okay.
If you look at tax as a handle to raise revenue, then you are going to perceive tax as a hammer. If you see tax as a hammer, then you treat everything else as a nail, right? But taxation is also a concept to promote, not only just to collect revenue. So you can look at taxation at point zero, that as an investment, how do we use taxation to facilitate the growth of a sector? Okay, and we've done that in this country. The tax rate doesn't apply equally across the 16 regions. There are certain regions that if you set up a business, the tax rate is lower and all of that. We've done all these things over the time to promote businesses. So let's not look at it that, yes, this sector is growing and therefore let's start taxing it. You could say that, no, let's allow it to grow. Because when for instance, our expectation is that once E-Levy is gone, we expect an uptick in the Momo transaction. What that means is that the operators in that particular sector, the turnover would increase. They are likely to report higher profit. What would that mean for corporate income tax? It's likely to go up. Once you also take E-Levy out, you promote consumption, right? And that is also good. The end result of production is consumption. Right. So you are also gaining from that side. You're also creating employment. You're also looking at how digitization as a cross-cutting intervention is helping other sectors of the economy to equally grow. Okay, so digitization is not a standalone. It can also be pursued as a cross-cutting intervention from a true education, construction. We are talking about digitization in farming, agribusiness, tourism, and all of that. So is that huge? Okay, and fundamental to actually the backbone of the economy. So let's look at it from that side. Then in an economy where it's hugely informal, we are saying that digitization, Momo transaction will help to promote financial inclusion.
Right.
That would also stimulate growth. And so, I mean, if you look at it from end to end, the data is clear. It wasn't the way to go. And I think that it's good that the government has abolished that. But of course, it will come at a cost. I actually don't look at the fiscal loss as a cost.
Okay, because I wanted to come to that, and when we played that clip, you heard Honorable Mahama Ayariga talk about that loss of $2 billion. I believe that's the amount that was projected to be collected for E-Levy in 2025. Now he's saying that is going to go back into the pockets of the everyday Ghanaian. Now, Prof, can you practicalize that actually for us? What does that mean then? If that $2 billion hasn't been collected and it stays within our pockets, within the economy, what really is that impact going to have on our economy as a whole?
Well, so this is how the majority leader was looking at it, that this represents a certain amount of money the state could have collected from businesses and households. Now we are not going to collect that. So you have access to that money to use it the way you consider or you deem fit. That's good. And it's not the first time. In fact, actually, we did the analysis in 2017 and realized that the taxes that the NPP abolished, together with the utility adjustment, remember 2017, 2018, they decided to reduce utility prices as a way of cushioning Ghanaians. From the taxes and then the utility adjustment actually put over 2 billion Ghana cedis in the pocket of Ghanaians and households. how did government also interpret free senior high school? They use the same concept the majority leader used in Parliament by saying that instead of you paying the fees every term, government has now taken that. What does that mean? It means that this amount of money is now in people's pockets, okay, as a more or less like a state subsidy, more or less, to the citizens, to households and stuff like that. So they do this to each other and all of that. But overall, let's look at it as incentives. Why do I look at it as an incentive? I look at it as an incentive that it will promote consumption, it will promote uptake, it will spell growth and all that. To that extent, it's very good. You remember, in this country, it's just that we are not driven by the data. Annually, Ghana spends close to 3.5% of our GDP on exemptions. We call that also tax expenditures on exemptions. That is not broad-based. It doesn't benefit every Ghanaian. It goes to selected businesses, companies, and stuff like that in the name of creating jobs and all of that. We have not even taken, we don't take stock of those jobs and all of that. So if you, at the beginning of this year, the biggest contention in Parliament was $350 million worth of exemptions under 1D, 1F. You remember? That's right. That's more than 70%. Of the fiscal losses from abolishing all these taxes. That's more than 70%. Okay, so we could look at the exemption regime, rationalize that, and we could make a considerable savings. Then again, if you look at what the government is talking about, the general tax refund account. Yes. Okay, previously it was the VAT refund. Okay, and then we expanded it to include customs and all other kinds of what? Refund. Okay. What was it? At some point, government said that exemptions, before you clear your goods from the port, you should make the payment. Then later, you can go for a refund. We've moved away from that. So if you look at the refund accounts, our own analysis indicates that the utilization or the drawdown is less than 50%. Less than 50%? Yes. Now, even though the drawdown had been less than 50%, that didn't mean that the money was sitting there, the other 50% was sitting there. At the end of the year, government will sweep the money and use it for other purposes. And so sometimes doing this will raise audit query because it was set up for a purpose. And if you are applying it for other reasons than what is stated in the law, then infractions will be adduced. So now we are saying, given the low drawdown, we are reducing the refund amount from 6% to 4% of previous year's collection, so that the difference will now be part of the consolidated fund that government can appropriate. Absolutely. We will look smart, probably, let's say, low-hanging fruit. In any case, these are all part of your collections. And the fact that there was a low drawdown necessarily doesn't mean that the amount, the rest, wasn't utilized. It was applied in some other ways, right, to meet other expenditure commitments and all of that. So maybe we'll say from 2025, it's a low-hanging fruit, but going forward, we should be looking at more sustainable ways of generating sufficient tax revenue. And the other thing I would like to add to this is that our problem is not just because we are not collecting enough tax revenue. That's not the problem. Okay. That's not a problem. What is the problem, Prof? The problem is that we have not been efficient with our expenditure. It is spending that stimulates growth. So even though we have a structural low tax to GDP ratio, it has never constrained government from spending the way they want to spend. Because the difference between our expenditure to GDP ratio and tax revenue to GDP ratio is explained through borrowing. So we have borrowed. It's not like government hasn't spent simply because we are not collecting enough revenue. We have spent. In fact, relative to the size of our economy, and we have data to back that, relative to the size of our economy, Ghana has spent like Malaysia. But have we gotten the returns that Malaysia has gotten? So we have spent relative to the size of our economy like Ivory Coast, like Benin quite recently, like Singapore, like Malaysia and the rest of them. They got growth. They got quality infrastructure.
So there was a correlation between how much was borrowed and the kind of growth we see in those economies. On home soil, we don't see that correlation.
We have spent, we harvested inflation and picked poverty and widening inequality. And then at the end of the day, when we say we are spent on roads, where are those roads?
Prof, hold that thought for me, because we're going to also take a look at what the everyday Ghanaian had to say about the scrapping of E-Levy as well as betting tax.
I think it's a good thing, especially as an entrepreneur. Usually people complain a lot when they are sending you money. So now that it's been taken off, I think it's good for businesses. Customers are no longer going to be concerned about the E-Levy charges and all that. And I think one annoying thing that used to happen was usually when you go out to buy something from the market, people are more concerned of the charges than the money itself. So they usually pass a comment like, for charges, they come home, and it's really annoying.
To most of the Ghanaian youth, myself included, I think it's kind of good news because we'll be able to can do our transactions a bit more without having these taxes being deducted, especially the betting tax, because it's something that I felt was unnecessary.
I'm happy the betting taxes has been taken off, because my brothers, my fellow colleagues that do the betting, when they lose alone. But when it's time that they win, then the government is going to take 20%. It's an actual cheat. It's really painful when those monies are taken from the money they win.
I think it's a good initiative because we one way or the other pay taxes directly or indirectly, and we all know that taxes are also used for the development of our country. But with this betting tax thing, I personally don't bet though, but then I feel like it's just not necessary. So they should just focus on getting taxes from other areas, but with the betting tax, it's not going to. I don't think it's going to help at all. So they cancelling it, I think, is the best thing to do.
Oh, it's a good news though. And then it was really affecting us in so many ways. As for instance, we sending our parents money and then we don't earn much. But you then have to add charges and all those stuff. So it was really worrying us. So we thank the government.
Oh, it's actually a good news for us because initially it was really taking much from us because when you stake the bets, when you lose, it's only you that loses. But now, because the betting tax has been taken off, in case you win a huge sum of money and no taxes, you'll be able to do whatever you want to, because initially it was 10%, and when you win something like 5,000 cedis, they'll be taking 500 cedis, which is a huge sum of money, which will actually go against you. But initially, when you lose, no one gives you money. It's coming from your pocket. When you lose, no one gives you money. While in the case when you win, the government decides to take 10%. And even if that 10% was even going into infrastructure, like hospital roads and things, even if we were seeing evidence of what the money was being used for, it would have even make sense. But we're seeing nothing. So now that it has been taken off, I think it's good.
So I think it's a good thing. I mean, we've been waiting for this taxes to be, scraped off, and finally has been done. For me, fingers are still crossed, because for all I know, it's just it's still on paper. We really need to experience that it has really been scraped off, and I think it's good, especially with the betting tax. That 10% tax was just it was just cruel. 10%, 1% would have actually been okay, but 10% was just wasn't it for me. So I think it is a good step in the right direction, and that.
All right, so some thoughts there from the everyday Ghanaian and investors alike. Let's jump onto the phone lines now and speak with Mr. Charles Kwesi Addo. He's the National PRO, Mobile Money Agent Association of Ghana. Mr. Addo, good morning to you.
Good morning, Helen.
Yes. How are you doing?
I'm great. We are good.
Thank you for joining us on the program. Now, I know that at the time that the E-Levy conversation had started, your association kicked against it vehemently, citing issues concerning reduced transactions. Now, looking back, what impact did E-Levy truly have on the mobile money business?
Thank you, Helen, once again. A very good morning to your channel viewers. I must say that the Mobile Money Agent Association of Ghana saw this coming. We've had several engagements with the previous government. And if I could recall, on the 10th May, we visited the Jubilee House, and the then sector minister with the finance minister and the president himself. We engaged them. We conducted a research. And based on data, we told them that people are seeking for alternatives. And therefore, government should look at the rate of the E-Levy. We even suggested that even if it is 0.5%, at least it will allow people the breathing space to pay without even noticing. But they never listened. Most of our businesses were folded up. Most agents have 2, 3, 4 outlets. But because people were so scared that when they send money, there are additional charges, and therefore they sought for alternatives, began to reduce their services with us. So we had no option than to close some of our outlets. So the impact was so huge. And in last year, the second quarter, we had the privilege to engage the then opposition leader, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, at his office. And he gave the assurance that, God willing, if he given the nod, he will see to it, because one of the requisite requirements for the IMF loan was the E-Levy. So as he sits afar, it is difficult for him to say A or B. But he put words to us that if he is able to rise to the high office, he will see how best to bring it to come. And here we are today. We are excited. It will help boost our businesses. It will open out for other opportunities that those who were scared to invest in our sector will come back. It will also interest you to know, during that period, most banks, mobile money strives on capital. Most banks were scared because they could not do the predictability of the policy, and therefore they were scared to loan to the mobile money agent. But trust me, those who were even willing did that at a very high rate. So it was so uncomfortable for the business community. And as you know, mobile money agents are businessmen. We are not politicians. Our main objective is to break even. But if these challenges keep popping up, then it doesn't go well or go well with our business.
Now, Mr. Addo, some analysts argue that the damage caused by E-Levy, such as reduced trust in mobile money, cannot be undone overnight. What measures do you think should be taken to restore confidence?
I think that we have to do proper education. Bringing out policy is one, and another for the citizenry to understand the policies too. One thing that cracked down the E-Levy was education. The populace were not well abreast with information, and therefore they never understood the whole thing. It will interest you to know that even the elite Ghanaians will visit an agent at a shop, and they will tell you that it is the agent who is doing the debiting of their account. They feel that government is not the one who is at least taking out the tax or the E-Levy, and they perceive that it is the agent who is at the central benefit of the levy. So we feel government have to do more. Once this has been spelled off, awaiting the president's assent, we think that government needs to do a fora to engage people to know which services is going to be affected. Do you know that some customers even believe that when you come to withdraw money and the normal charges of 1% is debited from their account, they still see that as E-Levy. So as a country, we have a long way to go. We need to educate the public and make sure they understand to prevent any chaos going forward.
All right. Now, finally, Mr. Addo, some people, some Ghanaians think that some taxes could be brought in maybe to replace E-Levy, that the government could make some proposition to bring back new taxes. How will your association react if that is the case? Will you push back against any new taxes introduced in your space?
Helen, I'm sorry, but I want to put it on record that for mobile money agents, we pay a lot of taxes that the Ghanaian is not aware of. We pay 10% withholding tax even before our commission is paid on the second week of every subsequent month. So we pay business operating permit to the various MMDCs. We equally pay rent, we pay land title. There's a lot of payment that goes wrong, but we are not saying that taxes are not good. We believe that we build a nation with taxes, and therefore we are law-abiding citizens. But government should listen to the citizenry. Policies or laws are made to be obeyed by the citizenry. But if you don't do broader consultation and based on your own obscure data, you come out with a policy which the ordinary is not in bed with you, then this is how it's going to end. So we believe that going forward, if government will introduce any additional taxes, but I don't hope that it should come from our sector, because the mobile money is going to drive a lot of sector. Come to talk of it, the government policy of the 24-hour economy, I'm telling you, the foundation of the 24-hour economy will become workable on the mobile money fraternity. People are not going to bank in the night, and therefore they will believe to rely solely on the fintech space. So government should rather invest more on security. Now, from January to now, I think that we have over 11 deaths, 3 in the Ashanti region, 3 in the Upper West, and the rest scattered across the country. What are measures government is putting in place to make sure this surge comes to a halt? Government should invest much in the mobile money sector by financing the agent with soft loans. That will help them to meet the needs of the prospective customers in order to boost the local economy.
All right, Mr. Addo, thank you so much for your time this morning and for giving us some much-needed perspective from your point of view. We've been speaking with Mr. Charles Kwesi Addo. He's the National PRO of the Mobile Money Agents Association of Ghana. And he says there's a lot of education that is needed in that space, and that is something that might have helped the previous government's cause when it comes to E-Levy. Now, Professor Bobkin, I will be coming to you again and we'll talk about betting tax. We've talked about E-Levy. We'll talk about betting tax in due course. But I do want to come back to Professor Benedicta because you said the premise for me actually for this next question, that we've seen governments come and repeal a number of taxes and then sooner rather than later, more taxes are introduced. So some get taken and sometimes even more get introduced. Is this something that the people of Ghana should be on guard about? Are there any plans to possibly introduce some taxes into our space in the near future?
Well, I do not think so. Now, just to go back to a few of the earlier discussion.
Yes.
I mean, I'm so glad that when you interviewed the general public about the E-Levy, we can see, I think it's almost like 100% of all the people interviewed are really happy that E-Levy has been scrapped. And this really shows that we have a good government coming in place, a government that listens to the cry of its citizenry. Now, talking about whether we are expecting more taxes, I think the NDC and His Excellency John Dramani Mahama has promised Ghanaians that he intends to reset Ghana and put Ghana in its right course. We all know, and as we indicated, and Professor Bobby also mentioned, that the issue about taxation is not just, government getting money, but we are talking about how we can stimulate growth, how we can reduce the burden of the business sector, how we can stimulate growth so that the unemployed youth, the unemployed people can get jobs. So increasing taxes and introducing new taxes, we've seen over the years that it did not help us so much. So I do not think that government is just baiting Ghanaians by removing these taxes so that they will be excited just for them to come back and introduce.
Have you heard some people say that it's a populist kind of approach? Have you heard some kind of sentiment like that?
Well, I think His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, he is not a first-time president. He's been president before. He's learned a lot of lessons whilst he was in opposition, waiting to become the next government. He's spoken to a number of people about how to really stimulate growth, and we can see that the appointment that we have currently shows that indeed he is in to reset Ghana. And I can bet you, if you go out there and you interview Ghanaians about their perception about the performance of this government, these 3 months, if you would not score 70%, maybe more, but I bet you would not score less than 70% if you go out there. So I think that it is an issue and a deliberate and a commitment to this government to really stimulate growth. And he has demonstrated by the cutting of a number of taxes. He indicated that he was going to introduce programs like the 1 million coders program, the Ejumarura, the Big Push. He talked about the entrepreneurship, and all this is supposed to stimulate growth. So the era that NPP, had those propaganda of, oh, we are going to move from Gotchesbeck economy into production, this is where we are going to see really a productive economy, because the government wants to stimulate growth, and we can stimulate growth by making sure that people are employed, by making sure that businesses grow, businesses expand, they are able to employ more people. And by so doing, the economy will pick up. So it is not just about taxation. We've seen that taxation is not just the avenue that government can generate revenue. By just blocking loopholes alone can generate huge amount of revenue to the government. And then also by reducing the number of ministers again, has generated a huge amount of money to the government. Wasteful expenditure, cutting it down, would also be an avenue to generate huge amount of money. So this alone shows that indeed government is not into burden Ghanaians by introducing new taxes. And he showed good faith. And I think that as a government, they will want to see their citizens being happy. And so far, indication shows that Ghanaians are happy, and I don't think that we are into a burden or make Ghanaians sad by introducing these taxes, because we know and we all believe that introduction of taxes is just, you shrink the business market or put a lot of burden. So as the mobile money PRO indicated, people had to close down a number of their outlets because of just the E-Levy, that was.
He said some had 3 or 4, but they had to just use one.
Exactly. And you sent out a number of people home. And we saw what happened when banks were collapsed because of the issue of we want to make sure that we structure things well. At the end of the day, a lot of people went home. And that, again, shrunk our economy because people were not working, people were not spending, and we saw a huge inflation for the first time in the history of Ghana. So His Excellency John Dramani Mahama have learned a lot from the mistakes of the previous government and will not be to put this burden on Ghanaians. So Ghanaians can be assured that His Excellency John Dramani Mahama is coming to serve in their interest, to make sure that happiness index, if they go out there to assess the happiness index of Ghanaians, it will go up. Confidence in Ghana, confidence in government is going to go up, and he's demonstrated that indeed he is committed in making sure that the ordinary Ghanaian is able to, live a very meaningful life, be able to meet 3 square meal day, unlike what we saw under the NPP, where people were out of jobs. The ordinary Ghanaian was really suffering. The pensioners were not spared by just, virtually government putting their hand in the pocket of pensioners and taking their money. Right. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama would not do that. So we are not expecting taxes that would make us more impoverished.
Now, Prof, it wasn't just the betting tax that was abolished as well as E-Levy. We know some other measures were taken, some amendments also made. Let's have that up on the screen so we can speak to that, and you can give us some much needed education on what exactly that means. So we've got Special Imports Levy Amendment Bill 2025. Now this amends existing law passed in 2013. I'm referring to Act 861 to extend period of implementing the law from 2026 to 2028. Professor Benedicta, so it should have expired on the 31st of this year, but we're seeing that extension. What exactly does that mean for those who might not correctly get that picture?
Well, I would honestly, I have not really looked at this particular law and how that means for us. But as we saw over the years, we saw a number of containers coming in, having reduced, and a number of people can attest to the fact that most businesses were diverting their goods to our neighboring country.
In fact, to Togo and Malak to actually go and pick it up from there.
Exactly.
They use unapproved
routes to bring it back. The goods into the country. So at the end of the day, we are losing money because of the taxes at the port. So I think this particular tax, I have not really looked at it very well, is to make sure that, you know, we reduce the burden on these individuals so as to make our port, you know, once again booming as it used to before the NPP era. And as I indicated, you see, as a people, there's a saying that we learn from our mistakes. We cannot repeat the same thing and expect different results. We've tried increment and introduction of new taxes. And we realize that when you do that, you hurt businesses. I remember His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia himself said tax hurts businesses, it hurts businesses. But we saw in that regime, they increased and introduced more taxes than ever. And so, as I said, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama is not somebody who is coming to learn on the job. He has the experience.
Absolutely.
And so I believe that having witnessed our ports, you know, shrinking in terms of businesses and the fact that individuals were diverting their goods to other ports and bringing in through unapproved routes, we would want to amend or look at these bills to make sure that taxes are reduced so that individuals can bring in more goods.
Absolutely. Let me see Professor Bobkin on this one, if you can weigh in on that last point for us, and then we'll go on to the issue of better tax.
So I lean towards her position. And more so, we realize that in addition to that, there's also the growth and sustainability levy that had been extended to 2028. And actually for mining, big companies in the mining sector, they've increased it from 1% to 3%.
3%.
Yeah, because because they've made super profits because gold prices have gone up.
And in fact, we're seeing some pushback in that industry.
Expect that. Nobody enjoys paying taxes.
Right.
If they had their own way, it would have even eliminated it. Remember, this growth and sustainability levy, you can trace it to the NPP's first administration from 2001, right? Then called the fiscal stabilization and all of that. The issue is that these taxes were introduced as temporary tax handles to correct imbalances. Sometimes the challenge in Ghana is that they come in as temporary tax handles, but then they assume a permanency going forward and the uncertainty that comes along with it. But I think overall, I want to believe that probably with time, this government will look at the fiscal regime in the extractive sector. Because if you look at the extractive sector and how much Ghana is getting compared to the extractive sector value chain, we are one of the least earners from our natural resources. We are earning far less compared to Nigeria. Nigeria is doing more than 50%. I mean, the average for Sub-Saharan Africa is more than 48%. We are doing around 19.3% and all of that. So I think that, yeah, this may look like a first fruit, but we should be looking at the fiscal regime entirely in the extractive sector so that we benefit optimally from our natural resources, because it's exhaustive, right? So a time will come, it will not be there. And more so, now with all the distractions that come along with gold mining illegal, I even call it irresponsible mining. Of course, some of the big companies are also doing irresponsible mining because...
So it could be legal, but whether or not it's responsible is a different
matter. It's a different thing, yes. So some of them are have permit and all that, but they are doing irresponsible mining, and that is costing distraction to our environment. The problem with GDP-based measure of performance is that the destructive process that we go through in arriving at that GDP is not reflected or is poorly reflected in that GDP calculation. So you can look at our GDP composition and say that, oh, mining and quarrying is driving growth and all of that. But the destructive aspect, the environmental damage, the destruction of our ecosystem is not reflected. So you need to have a balanced view to all of these things. And
because I think interestingly, Prof, could it be the case that if you were to even quantify the destruction and you juxtapose that against what we're earning, then really...
We want to say let's have a cost. Guys, hold on. You look at the cost-benefit analysis. Look, we face existential threats from irresponsible mining. And even though the government has done well in the last couple of months with the taxes and all that they've done, I still hold a different view that the government has not lived up to expectation when it comes with dealing with irresponsible mining.
And you mean this new government, new NDC government?
We are on borrowed time. You know something? It's just that, look, if we leave it to politicians alone, we will die in this country. We face existential threat from irresponsible mining. And I think the urgency that is needed, we need a bit of the Trump effect in dealing with irresponsible mining. It has to be done. If it's state of emergency, we have to deploy that quickly. How do we turn an existential threat to existential opportunity? We can, just because the operators in the irresponsible mining sector have found their way into the political party financing model, our hands are tied? No, we can't. So I think that, yes, the president has done well. I looked at the 2025 budget, the expenditure cut, the tax and all of that. Good news, he's checked the box. But you know what? Welfare is not just GDP. For some of us, welfare is the ecosystem. Welfare is our environment. It's our water bodies. We want to go back to our villages and drink from the water that once sustained our lives.
Like you used to?
Like I used to. Those days, I used to walk like 5 hours every day to school and back. There was no pure water. Okay? We drank from the river. By the roadside in the afternoon, you just dip your hand into it and drink and go home. It didn't kill us. So now go there and see. Okay, there can never be 24-hour economy in the absence of environmental sustainability. It's a deception. So if you want to go on the path of 24-hour economy, economic transformation, starting from macroeconomic stability, you want to look at your environment. Our planet Earth is the reason why in the development literature today, we are not just talking about GDP. In fact, some people don't look at GDP as gross domestic product. They look at it as gross domestic problem. I hope you understand that. Because GDP is not everything. Okay, we are talking about development that reflect that preserve our planet Earth. That is people focus. And that also reflect partnership, peace, and prosperity. You are looking at the 5 Ps. And if you use the 5 Ps to judge the government agenda, we will fall short unless something is done. And I know that the good news is that with President Mahama, he will listen. He will not insult us. You
say that the door will not be shut on academia. You can actually go, because I'm seeing some comments that say that President Mahama should consult with Professor Bobkin.
It's not necessary.
I see the comments.
It's not necessary. It's not necessary.
All right.
There are a lot of advisors, and I believe that, look, the president's second coming, maybe it was good he lost the 2016 election. You can see our president is a different person, right? And if you look at the measures he's talking about, in fact, value for money in the area of procurement above a certain level, it has to be subjected to value for money and all of that. Very beautiful and all of that. My view and my considered view, the only thing I want the president to do for me is to take proactive steps in dealing with irresponsible mining. That's the biggest threat to Ghana's future. It's not taxes. Of course, they count and all of that. So if the president would do that, yes. So he doesn't need to consult me. Okay, the data
There's a
is there.
strong case being made for you in the comments. A very strong one indeed. What do you say?
I thank them.
Right.
I thank them. But
Right.
I mean, look, this country, the reason we haven't developed is not because of lack of knowledge. Maybe in the book of Hosea 4:6, Bible says that for lack of knowledge, my people perish. Ghana is perishing not because of lack of knowledge. The knowledge is there. The question is whether we want knowledge to lead our development. The understanding is that development is knowledge intensive. Less knowledge lead. The data is there. Let's be driven by the data so that whatever we are doing, we can say it's sustainable because it's driven by data. There's also broader consultation.
All right. Now, Professor Buckin, let's also talk quickly about the abolishment of the betting tax before we wrap it up on the issue or the topic of the morning. Now, it's been
I raised my
with...
hand.
And I mean, I knew I was going to get that reaction from you because it's something that you have been quite passionate about. And I mentioned to Professor Benedicta as well that at the time when we were talking about betting tax last year, there was also that angle of whether or not government should be focusing on educating the public and our young ones about responsible betting or responsible gambling. In other jurisdictions, for example, if you go on a platform, they restrict the number of times you are able to use the platform and so on and so forth. There are adverts
school
on TV.
Time and age.
That's right. There's some restrictions on there. Now, what do you make of the abolishment of the betting tax as far as this conversation is concerned? And let's talk about it also from a money perspective, from a fiscal perspective.
I'm conflicted to some extent because I have a different view about betting tax. My considered view was that it shouldn't have been abolished because of the detrimental aspect of the addiction and the fact that so you can use tax to redirect energy to more productive areas and all of that. So if you look at the growth in the betting, the implication for productivity, addiction, corruption, and all of that, I think that we should have maybe been a bit more, adopt a certain posture that reflects the negative aspects of promoting this line of activity and all of that. But I see that it's a political promise, and the president, I'm unable to congratulate him so much on this particular one with respect to compared to E-Levy. And then, of course, there's another thing. Let me say that before my time, I run out of time. So there is the COVID-19 health levy, right, which is part of the VAT family. Okay, I heard that the government was saying they are looking at towards the end of the year. It shouldn't take us that long. Right. I mean, I read from the 2025 budget that they are inviting the IMF to come and help them in correcting the distortions.
This is correct, Prof.
Yeah. I don't see it to be that complex, actually, to correct, right? And I think that they shouldn't buy time. Okay, and
you call it buying time.
Yes, and then people are paying because I'm sure they're looking at the revenue side, right? So end of the year they are able to collect and all of that. But I think that if you look at the effect of the VAT distortion, right, and especially the straight levies, that doesn't have an avenue for recovery from the input side. It adds directly to the high productive cost base of doing business. So we should be looking at the entire value chain as we promote 24-hour economy. Because if you look at with the IMF program, with all these taxes, the evidence on the ground is that the cost of producing locally, the inflation on locally produced items is higher than imported inflation. So it means that it's more expensive if you have to set up a production function, produce in Ghana here, compared to if you have to import. So it means that if you're an entrepreneur today, in fact, actually from November 2023, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to produce, you are far better off importing the item from outside this country, pay all the port charges and put a local logo on it, and it will be cheaper than if you were to produce it here. Okay, so what that means is that we need to de-risk the private sector cost of doing business or the model. And one way is to look at the VAT. If you add the straight levies to the standard VAT rate, effectively our VAT is more than 21%. And actually it's the highest. It's one of the highest in the whole of Africa. Even though if you look at our books, you will see that our standard VAT rate is 15%, as though it's the lowest. If you add the straight levies, it's that high. Right. The IMF itself, per their own studies, are telling us that any VAT rate in excess of 18% is counterproductive.
Okay, that's where we are.
We are more than that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so what we are doing is actually robbery. I said this actually right after COVID. Look, since COVID, Ghana has adjusted tax rate and introduced more than 15 of them. Come on. This is state-sponsored robbery. I've said that, and I still stand by that. So I think that we need to, look, there is nothing wrong if it goes well with Ghanaians. See from the interview, people are happy. E-Levy is gone. How much was it after all? You send maybe 1,000, you pay something, but it was hurting. Having paid your taxes, and then what is left, you send something to your mother in the village, and then even you send something to your wife. She's going to the market, she calls you, look, the money, I came to the market, I realized that prices have changed in the last 2 weeks or so. Can you do some momo? There's tax on it.
That's right.
Come on.
And then she purchases, then that is also tax. The person
you
that
sleep,
uses
you are paying
that money.
tax. You wake up, you are paying tax. You brush your teeth, you are paying tax. Come on. This country, let's have a briefing space. Let's create the enabling environment that allows Ghanaians to enjoy their lives. We have not committed a sin by being Ghanaians. Okay, and let me put it this way. COVID did not only affect government. COVID affected you. It affected households, businesses, and government. The way we recover from COVID must not put the focus solely on government. We must look at all of us recovering inclusively. That is the only way the recovery will be sustainable. So that it cannot be that government balance sheet has been paid. Of course, not only government, but this is government that largely has been inefficient. Look, let me tell you something. Between 2012 and 2022, nearly 80% of all big-ticket government procurement were not done through competitive tendering. They were done through restricted and sole sourcing or single sourcing. That doesn't augur well for this country, and that is why I said that we have spent, as for expenditure, we have spent on roads. Oh yeah, do you remember during the NDC's between 2012 and 2016, they published a green book. I think you have a copy. The green book was about infrastructure.
Right.
Roads and all of that. Where are those roads? Do you remember that under the NPP, they also told us that if you want to know the infrastructure they've done, go to a certain website.
There was a website that was published that had some a list of some projects
God's sake,
that had been
government
undertaken.
took taxes from us. You said you have used it to build roads. I should go to a certain website to go and see the road. I want to see it when I'm going to Kumasi on the Nsawam Road. I want to use the road when I'm going to Winneba. Go there and see.
In fact, Prof, so based on that, do you think that's why when it comes to paying taxes, there seems to be a disconnect? The people of Ghana cannot actually see or visualize where those monies are going.
The theories that explain tax compliance, voluntary tax compliance, one of them is fiscal exchange. That when taxpayers make good on their commitment, they expect. This is a bit different from saying that I pay my tithe. How it is used is between the pastor and God. You know, but this one I'm paying it to a government. So I'm expecting. So if the government is not utilizing our tax revenue efficiently, it affects tax compliance, especially voluntary tax compliance. I want to see in the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Finland, and the rest of them, they are paying higher taxes.
That's right.
There's minimal complaint. Why? Public service delivery is efficient. The roads are there. Roads do not exist in a textbook. Roads do not exist in a certain website.
And then we see all the connection. I mean, they have lower rates of all kinds of things, diseases, road, traffic accidents, and all and that.
The IMF did some work, which they call the mean speed score. The distance and the speed between intercities, they use it to measure the quality of infrastructure. Ghana is not in the top 10.
Where do we rank?
We are 34th in Africa. Our mean score average is 56 kilometers per hour.
Some interesting perspectives there, Prof.
Angola, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire are all ahead of Ghana.
Senegal is just close by.
Go to Senegal and see from the airport to the city. See the roads.
Thank you, Professor.
They are using it. It's not in a website.
Let me come to you, Professor Benedicta, quickly on this one. I only have about a minute to go for you to react to that, and then we'll wrap up on the big issue.
Yes, I want to react to what he said.
Please go ahead.
He said the Green Book, infrastructure should not be in book. You want to see it. I think, Prof, you are not being fair to us because the infrastructure are there. When you go to Ridge Hospital, in the Green Book, we indicated that there was expansion. When you go, you will see the expansion. When you go to Formina Hospital, it is there for you to see. We talk about UG Medical Center, is there for you to see. We talked about Formina Hospital. When you go to Dodowa Hospital, these are just a few to mention. The E-blocks.
The roads.
Roads are there.
Where?
Roads are there. I've just forgotten the number of roads that we constructed, but NDC did construct a number of roads. And when you go, they are there for you to see. What we witnessed over the years is that these roads were not maintained. As human beings, we have cars. We maintain our cars. So also our roads. You cannot say that when you construct roads, you would not maintain them. NDC did construct a number of roads. And the fact that the Green Book is just for individuals to go and assess what we say we have done. And so when you take the Green Book and you go to the field, you will see these roads that are being constructed. So I would disagree with him completely when you say that the roads are just in the textbooks or are just in the Green Book and not in on the ground. They are there for us to see. And so I would just want to conclude on that. But I just also want to say that, look, this issue of betting tax, people should not think that it's a way to encourage more people to go into betting. And so that will be a counterproductive because the youth, instead of working, would be doing betting. Right. I personally believe that the deliberate effort by this government to create a job is an avenue to lure or to get a lot of the youth from the betting center rather to a sustainable employment source. And as I said, there are a number of programs, the CODES program, the entrepreneurship, the Ejumara program, the Big Push. These are all deliberate efforts to get people from these centers to a more sustainable job. So by betting or removing the taxes is not to say that you are encouraging individuals to go into betting. Nevertheless, we have taxes on alcoholic drinks. That does not prevent individuals from taking alcoholic beverages. So, as I said, this government is deliberate about this, and they've started well. And so, buying Papa.
Thank you so much for that, and what an exciting discussion it has been this morning. Very grateful for your time. And we were joined in the studios by Professor Benedicta Yaira Fosu Mensah. She's part of the NDC's National Communication Team. We also had Professor Godfred Bokpin. He's an economist, also no stranger to the platform. We also had Mr. Charles Kwesi Addo. He is the National PRO, Mobile Money Agent Association of Ghana. And thank you to all of you who also sent in your messages on our socials. This has been the big issue, but it is a beachcation. This Easter holidays, create unforgettable memories at the beach with the family and friends by booking the all-inclusive 3-night package from the 18th to the 21st of April 2025, starting at 6,800 cedis for a couple. Now, the early bird discount also applies if you book and pay before the 31st of March 2025. You save 20% extra. Now, before 10th of April, you save 10% extra. Now, this package offer gives you access to all in-house facilities, swimming pool, gym, cinema with popcorn, board games, snooker, and the like. You can also enjoy free airport pickup from Takrade on Friday, the 18th of April, 2025. Now, there are fun activities to engage in. This includes live band, tour of the beautiful facility with an electric golf cart. There's in-house carnival, splash playground for the kids, sip and paint, bicycle rides, quad bike rides, boat rides to the Maha village, jet ski, banana boats, party bus ride, a trip to Inzulezu, and so much more. Maha Beach Resort doesn't offer just accommodation, they deliver experience. Maha Beach Resort is your one-stop holiday destination for all families, groups, for your honeymoons, private and corporate events, and so much more. Now, for your reservations, do call the following numbers: 030-3977-773, or on mobile it is 050-157-0684 or 054-0124-114. You can also email sm@maharesort.com, and you can find them also on all the socials. The website is maharesort.com. Remember, we're still cashing out this morning. It is *439#. If you don't play, you don't win. Get in the game. We'll go on a quick break. When we come back, there's more right here on New Day.